Okay, this is your pulley belt idler. That's the part number. And nice thing about this one is it comes with the bolt. Some of them do, some of them don't. This one did. So again, this one doesn't sound bad, but who knows. So I'm just going to go ahead and replace it. It's best if you can find a water pump service kit. Usually comes with the belts, the tensioners, everything you need for one price. It's probably the best way to go. A lot of people try just to replace a pump or the pulley. You know, it's your car, but I recommend replacing everything. It's like when people do brakes and they only have the money to do like the fronts or the rears or something. Yeah, just save your money and do it all at once. Better safe than sorry. Oops. Okay, so 14 long, fits both the new pulley and this old pulley. Let's see how tight it is. Nope, it wasn't that tight at all. Alright, so if you have a long set of wrenches, it's going to make your life a little easier, especially on this particular pulley. Putting these things back in at this angle is kind of a trick. Let's see if I can get this out. I freaking need my other hand. Nope. I'm going to need both hands for a second. And one thing, especially with all this kind of stuff, I always make sure that they're the same size. Everything looks good. Big difference on this is how long that bolt sticks out compared to that one. Doesn't really matter unless you have wide tools. But so now we're just going to go ahead and screw that back in, tighten it back up. This one doesn't sound bad. There's no rattling or anything. What's rattling is that spacer. But there's no grinding or anything in the bearing. So that pulley's still good. Keep it as a spare in case you ever need it. But like I said, I would replace everything with new ones. You can see that nice little shiny spot right there. That's where it goes back in. And you're going to want to use both hands to do this. So for me, I'm going to have to reach around on this side and reach around on that side and hold it while I get the damn thread started. And don't cross thread this, so don't force it. Just do it nice and slow. Okay, so something must be going wrong because I got it on the first try without dropping it, and it threaded all the way down tight, so that's a good thing. Now I'm just going to put the wrench back on there and tighten it back up real quick. At this, I don't have a torque wrench small enough to fit in that gap with a socket, so we are just going to do as tight as we can once we get this bottomed out. Somewhere around the house I have one of those really cool sets of ratcheting box end wrenches. I know where my standard set is, but I do not know what I do with my metric one. And that's what my garage looks like right now. I've got race car parts for the Porsche. I dug out all of my old fishing equipment. I'm trying to sell that. I've got my scuba gear here on the other side that I'm trying to sell. My toolboxes. Yeah, everything's just a mess. So they're buried in there somewhere. So I'm just using the tools I have available. So a few more turns and this should just about be finished tightened. Alright, so that was like 6 more turns. And now I can one more, I think. Yep. Okay. So that's that. So now the next thing is we're going to get that harmonic balancer pulley out of there. I have a kind of a trick for that. So if it goes well, I just got to hunt down a ratchet strap and I'll be able to set that up and get moving. All right, so a little trick that I have about getting the bolt free without damaging anything is using a ratchet strap. Usually what I do is I lace it through a few times, and then I lace it through something else over here, and that prevents the motor from turning and allows me to get the bolt in and out without having to do something hinky. So I'm gonna get that all tied up, and I'm gonna figure out what size that is. 23 maybe, I guess. All right, I've got my wrenches here. I'll figure it out real quick. All right, so it's gonna look something like that. You're gonna lace it through there a few times. You're gonna hook it to something. I've hooked it into the lower control arm. That is a 22. Now I'm gonna go get my breaker bar and a 22 socket. We're gonna get that broke free. It's gonna move a little bit until this tightens up, but it's not gonna move that much on you. So once you get it tight, it'll just come right out of there. All right, so I have two 1/2-inch breaker bars. You can see one is a little longer than the other. Just depends on how much room you have. I could go higher with my quick jack. I've got one more lock I can go, which will give me, I think, 1.5 feet or something like that. But I'm working at this height right now, so just about 2 clicks up on the jack stand. Jack stand's there in case the quick jack fails. It will catch it, preventing the car from slamming to the ground and crushing me. Oops. I don't know why this keeps turning upside down. I'll have to fix it in the video. All right, so as you can see, it moves a little bit, but that's what we want. So it's just about to the point where it's tight enough for me to go ahead and break it free. I do need both hands to do that though. Okay, that was not nearly as tight as I thought it was going to be, because as soon as I put it down and put both hands on it and gave it a little twist, it's loose. So, how loose? I don't know. I don't think I can turn it by hand yet. Let's put this on the short one and see. Oh yeah, it's not loose. Now it really is loose. Yeah, so it didn't even take about 1/4 of a turn. Oops, here. Is that better? All right, that's that. Yep, no thread lock on that. All right, so now I'll just untie my knot, so that way I can unhook it from right there, and we'll get that off and we'll get the new one on. And then again, I will have to look up the torque specs. That I can get a torque wrench on, so I will. Basically, putting it back on, I'll show you, but it's the same procedure. You just move it to the other side because you're going to go clockwise to tighten it, and that way you get it good and tight. Okay, so once you get that out, it's not even pressed on there, it's just held in by that little pin, so that just falls out, not like the old school ones that are actually in the block. This thing, I don't know, probably weighs 2 or 3 pounds. It's fairly heavy. This one, super light. I don't know if that's going to make any difference as far as power or response, but purple is my favorite color, which is weird because I don't own a damn thing that's purple. So who knows, but yeah, so we're gonna get this on there, and it looks, whoever had it on last kind of boogered it a little bit, but it should be all right once it's all tightened on there. I hate it when, this is why I don't like to buy used parts, but it was cheap enough. So I'm gonna get that on there, put the bolt back in, and then I'll get that laced back up. But man, that is heavy. I should weigh that just to find out. I wish I had a scale small enough to weigh this. I mean, this is probably a pound. That's, the other one's at least double. So we're gonna get rid of that. All right, so I'm gonna get that back up in there, and here we go. All right, so that's back on, and this is just finger tight for right this second. I'm going to do the same thing, except I'm going to lace it to this side if I can. That way when I'm turning it, it will be tensioned here or here. There's a lot more room on this one, so I should be able to get it into one of these. Usually I use a thinner strap, but I can't find it. Again, it's probably in the garage somewhere buried. So, all right, I've got to go help the wife again, so I'll be back in a bit. Okay, so I looked up the torque specs on this bolt. So supposedly it is a one-use bolt, but I'm going to go ahead and reuse it again. I'm trying to see. Yep. Okay, so depending on which bolt you have, there's two bolts. Mine clearly has some numbers stamped in it. So that is 36 pounds and a quarter turn, whatever. So no torque wrench required, technically. The water pump bolts are 16 pounds. So I'm not going to use a torque wrench on that. And then the water jacket was like 8 or something like that. So we're just going to tighten everything down snugly and make sure we don't have any leaks. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and strap this back down, and then I'm just going to tighten that pulley down, and I'll just use my wrench like I did earlier and call that good. So first things we're going to do is knock that out. But a little side note, that pulley is supposed to be 70% lighter than this guy. So I'll weigh this one later, and then we'll figure out what that actually weighs, or supposed to weigh. All right, and that's all it took. Just a little, you can see, not very tight. So I did put a torque wrench on here, tightened it to 36 pounds, and then just gave it about a quarter turn just to make sure it was tight. I'll come back and check that later. Once the engine's running, I'm going to go ahead and tighten up the rest of the bolts on the water pump. The idler pulley I tightened down, this just give it a good ugga and tighten that down. So we'll do the water pump, then we'll do the thermostat housing, and then I'm going to test fit the intake spacer before I put the alternator back. So probably in the video here, just after I tighten up the water thermostat housing, we'll end that for today, and then tomorrow we'll start all over. All right, so when I'm doing small bolts and I don't want to break them, what I'll do is I'll just use 2 fingers and whatever I can muster. That should be about 16 pounds. I'm only pulling it with my fingertips. Once that's snug, and I just do it again. That's just fingertip. So if I snap a bolt using my fingertips, either A, I've gotten way stronger, or B, that was a weak bolt to start with. But that's the way I usually do it. Valve cover gaskets or valve cover bolts back in the old day, same thing. Just using your fingers. Don't use your arm or your wrist or your hand. Just kind of pull with your fingers, and that should be enough. 2 fingers should not be, you should not, unless you're Arnold Schwarzenegger or muscle man builder or whatever, you should not be able to snap those bolts just using 2 fingers. And that will save you a torque wrench. So I got the 4 bottom bolts here down on the water pump. I'm going to go up on top and do the top 2 and the thermostat while I'm up there. Same thing here, just using my finger, nothing more. Now, the bottom one, I think I have to come in from the bottom. I can't get it from any other angle. All right, so I got those 2. I used a 1/4 inch ratchet with a long, and it was enough for me to get around everything and still just be able to use my fingertips to tighten those up. So those are tight, pulley's tight, the other pulley's tight, water pump bolts are tight. The one thing I do have to do is clean up this guy, so I'm going to do that next. I'm going to put it on my wire wheel real quick and knock all of this surface rust off, at least make it look nice, and then we will try to get those 4 bolts back in and see what we got. Alright, took the wire wheel to it, cleaned it up, so now it doesn't have any rust on it, so hopefully that'll grab better. Once I get all the pulleys in place and everything, I'll go back through with some brake clean and just wipe all the pulleys down, make sure I didn't get any of the coolant on any of the pulleys, especially like the AC pulley. That will prevent them from squeaking. And brake clean, not carburetor cleaner. Carburetor cleaner has a bit of an oil in it, so when you spray it onto things it doesn't clean. Brake clean is better because it doesn't leave a residue. That's why it's brake clean. So just a side note. So we'll get this pulley back on and we're going to call that a day. So when I'm trying to reinstall these pulleys where I can't see the bolt holes, I try to put the hole on the pulley at basically 12 o'clock, and then I put one of the bolts into the pulley hole at 12 o'clock and kind of feel its way in, and then once I get a few threads in, I try to get the bottom at 6 o'clock, and that should be enough for me to finger tighten those down and then put the other 2 in. We will see how this goes. Surprising enough, those 2 went in without any issue. They're just both kind of finger tight. It leaves it enough to wiggle around. And now I'm going to do the other 2. And these should be the easy ones, of course, unless I drop them. And bring that other one up to 12 o'clock. Get it in there. Alright, so all 4 of those are in. Now I just have to snug them down. Little tip, it's easier to torque or tighten those down when the belt's in place, because the belt will help hold it so it doesn't turn on you. It doesn't take a whole lot, just a few pounds, so just use your fingertips to tighten them up and just make sure they're snug all the way through. And when you're doing any kind of work like this, after 100 miles or so, you want to go back and recheck all those bolts that are connected to spinny parts. I've seen them back out. So that's it for today. That's where we're going to end. I did order the block off caps for the 2 lines that I want to get rid of, this one there and this one right there. I'm not going to run a hose because I don't plan on putting the old thermostat throttle body back on there, so our coolant lines to the throttle body back on there. I'm looking at the thermostat. So and then the next thing will be dropping the oil filter to get the oil cooler out of there, and then we'll put the new oil cooler in. But yeah, I think tomorrow, once I have all this, I'll go ahead and put I can't put the belt back on until I put the alternator on, so I'm gonna leave that for now. I'm gonna test fit the intake spacer and see if it leaves me enough room, because I've got this, I mean, you saw how tight that is. So if I have enough room, great. If I don't have enough room, well, then no intake spacer, but we will just put the other stuff, and then we'll start putting this thing back together. All right, well, thanks for watching. All right, so I went ahead and tightened those down. Because this pulley has a hole in it all the way around, I was able just to stick a small screwdriver in there to hold it, and then just tighten those bolts up. So those are all tight. The crank pulley is tight. The idler pulley is tight. So the only thing we have left now to do is test fit everything. Once we know that whether or not that's going to fit, then we'll put the alternator back in place, and then we'll test fit it again to make sure that it's not hitting the alternator. But I want to make sure we have clearance before I decide what I'm going to do. And then while I'm waiting for those caps to come in, I'll go ahead and get rid of that oil cooler. And that's pretty much it. It's not too far. Regretfully for me, I'm only doing about an hour or so of work a day, so it takes me a little longer to get things done. You know what I will do while I have a few minutes? I'm gonna go through here and vacuum up around this intake real quick, since I got my vacuum cleaner sitting right there. Might as well just knock that out, and then go get me a shower.